Starting us right at number 10, we have the Otterbein Cemetery. It was during the 1840s that James Henry was faced with a dilemma. He had been courting two women, Rachel Hodge and Mary Angle. He couldn't decide which one to marry until one day, while going home, Henry ended up falling asleep on the horse he was riding on. The horse would then stop in front of Mary's house. James saw this as a sign and married Mary shortly after. As a wedding gift, James gave Mary the horse that led him there. Their love was so strong, but short-lived, when Mary died in 1845. She was then buried in Otterbein Cemetery, and as fate would have it, Henry would go back and court the other girl, Rachel. But shortly after their new marriage, people began noticing a strange outline of a bloody horseshoe on his late wife's tombstone. James took this as Mary's objection to the new marriage. And perhaps this was true, because days after, strange sounds and sightings were reported in the cemetery. James Henry would be found in his barn, dead, with a mark of a horseshoe visibly on his forehead. Creeping at our number 9 spot, we have Satan's Hollow. Beyond the woods, in a quiet blue ash community, some say exists a portal to hell named Satan's Hollow. Being part of an old sewage system, the tunnels are said to be haunted by a shadow man and other angry spirits. Supernatural markings are seen all over the tunnel walls. Deep inside the tunnels are a supposed altar room where they would commit violent rituals, including sacrificing animals and even humans. Over the years, several ghost hunters and paranormal investigators have visited this site, claiming to have communicated with spirits. Coming in at number 8, we have Athens Asylum. This mental asylum stood from 1874 up until 1993. However, some pretty scary stuff occurred within these walls. Patients were mistreated, physically abused, not fed, strapped to their beds, and even lobotomized, which caused many patients to suffer from life-changing side effects and disabilities. One particular patient named Margaret Schilling went missing in 1979 for 42 days. Her corpse would be later found in an abandoned area in the hospital. The odd thing was that her body was found naked, with her clothes folded neatly beside her, and then her body began rotting so bad that it left a permanent stain behind that could still be seen to this day. In attempts to hide the stain, workers found it impossible to clean up the imprint, and now it's said that the abused patients of this asylum still haunt the building, including the spirit of Margaret. At our number 7 spot, we have the Bloody Bridge. In the 1850s, a bridge that crosses the Miami-Erie Canal was the site of a horrific murder. The story begins with a couple named Bill Jones and Minnie Warren. They started off head over heels over one another, so it was a big surprise when Minnie ended the relationship all of a sudden. Bill was devastated. Meanwhile, the girl seemed to have moved on pretty quickly and began dating a man by the name of Jack Billings instead, and Bill would become a rage-fueled person with full intent to plot his revenge. So on one cold night in 1852, he waited near the bridge that crossed the canal. When the new couple was walking over the bridge, he jumped out of nowhere, slicing Jack's head clean off using an axe, and startled Minnie, which made her fall from the bridge, drowning soon after. This would cause many locals to name it the Bloody Bridge. At our number 6 spot, we have the Loveland Frogmen. This is not so much a scary urban legend, but rather weird, so I couldn't ignore it. The Loveland Frogmen are 4 feet bipedal frogs with a leathery skin and webbed feet. I know, it sounds super silly, but the people who actually encountered the Loveland Frogmen didn't find them funny by any means. Instead, they would shoot farmers, businessmen, and even policemen on sight. One report even said a policeman shot and killed one. Everyone's description of the creature was the same except the height, making many to believe that there are more than one frogman out there. In the hump of our list, we have the melonheads. In the suburbs of Michigan, Ohio, locals fear of humanoids called melonheads. First theorized in the 1970s, melonheads are said to be completely bald with misshapen bulbous heads, deformed arms and legs, teeth like daggers, and luminous red eyes. The legend goes that a doctor named Crow and his wife lived in the woods of Ohio. In a nearby orphanage, he convinced them to kidnap and then conduct experiments on a group of orphan children suffering from hydrocephalus, a condition that caused the kid's head to swell to 3 times the normal size. The tests were both malicious and an ill-fated attempt to save them. These experiments would cause even more swelling and give them an appearance of a melon head. After days of torture, the kids would decide to kill Dr. Crow, and it's said that these kids still survive off the nearby land, only emerging at nights. Taking our number 4 spot, we have the Defiance werewolf. In the summer of 1972, the people of Defiance, Ohio were claiming that they were being terrorized by a lone werewolf. The sightings of this werewolf would be typically at nights nearby the railroad tracks. The beast was reported to be 7 to 9 feet tall, very hairy, and wielding a club. It said that 2 men were working on the tracks at night One of the two men, Ted Davis, would report to police that he was attacked by a half-man, half-dog creature. Luckily for locals, after the summer, the beast almost seemed to vanish out of existence. But the story still lingers, and perhaps a werewolf is still out there, hiding. All the way at number 3, we have the Gore Orphanage. In Vermilion, Ohio, there's a story about an orphanage. During the 1800s, a mysterious fire broke out in a building, trapping all inside, leading to at least 50 deaths. The town was horrified by the event and refused to allow a replacement orphanage to be built on the site. Ohio residents wanted nothing more than just to forget about the tragedy and move on. Out of sight, out of mind, or so they thought. The fire itself is said to have left a stain on the area forever, with reports saying that if you try and approach the old orphanage, you'll be met with many children ghosts roaming around the land and running in the forest. The whereabouts of the remains of the orphanage are never clearly shared, and it appears that the location will forever be a mystery. However, there is a road called Gore Orphanage Road in Ohio, so I think it would be best to start there if you want to see some child apparitions. Here at number 2, we have the Cry Baby Bridge. In Salem, Ohio, there is a bridge just off of Egypt Road. Over the years, this bridge has collected many terrifying stories. But the stories are similar in the sense that it involves a mother and a baby child. Sometime in the 1970s, a young couple decided to picnic near the bridge with their baby. They slowly got distracted by the surroundings and by each other that they didn't notice the baby wandering off away from them. It was not until the baby began to cry, the couple realized their mistake and quickly chased after the sound of their baby. They were too late. The baby had fallen into the water and passed away. In an attempt to save the baby, but mostly devastated by her loss, the mother decided to jump into the water and met the same fate as their baby. Now legend has it that if you go to this bridge, you can hear the ghostly cries of a baby coming underneath the bridge. Taking our number 1 spot of our list, we have Helltown, Ohio. Boston Mills, now known as Helltown, was bought out by the US government to make way for the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. However, rumor has it that this town was closed down because of an accident chemical leak, causing citizens to mutate. To this day, the town remains completely abandoned. However, people who visited the area have reported seeing many disfigured, mutated people hiding throughout the area. And to make matters worse, apparently there is a satanic church located at the town center. The area is littered with even more dark legends, including an old abandoned school bus where a series of murders took place in. It is said that if you peek into the windows, you can see the ghosts of the kids or even the killer behind it. At a number 10 spot, we have the Moonville Tunnel. If you're out on a hike in the Zaleski State Forest in Ohio, you might encounter this normal looking bridge. Or so it seems. Built in 1856, this tunnel was created for a railroad to transport coal around the state. And at the time, it was the only way to go in and out of the town of Moonville. Although the tunnel served its function and is still up to this day, the one fatal flaw about it was the limited space it offered to the pedestrians walking through it. Basically, when a train would pass through the tunnel, it would give little to no space at all for people to walk through it. And you could see how this could be detrimental considering it was the only way in and out of the town. Over the years, many unfortunate people would be struck by the train while walking through this tunnel, and many of the bodies were buried in the surrounding forest. By 1947, the town of Moonville was eventually abandoned, but this place remains a hiking spot for many. And many of the hikers claim to see former workers hanging out by the tunnel, with some claiming to hear voices when walking through this dark tunnel. At a number 9 spot, we have the Rogues Hollow. A few miles southwest of Akron is a former mining town known as Rogues Hollow, and from the name, you can see why it's Ohio's own version of the Sleepy Hollow tale. Now, like many rural areas in the state, Rogues Hollow is a perfect place to hike, eat, and see nature, but it's recommended that you do all of these during the day and not the night, because that's when everything begins to change. In 1957, a local named Russell Frey wrote about the area saying, quote, "Ghosts are best seen in the hollow on a moonlight night when there are large fleecy clouds overhead. Then the hollow fairly comes alive with the residents of the spirit world. It's said that you can see more as twilight turns to pitch blackness of the night. Then you can see nooks and crannies with shadowy forms on the move. There's so much to see here. First, you have the headless horseman who can be seen walking the roads and throughout the forest. Then we have the gray lady who walks in front of people's cars. And we also have another crybaby bridge where a woman and her child passed away, and if you turn off your engine on this bridge, you might hear the sounds of a baby crying. At a number 8 spot, we have the Minerva Monster. Ohio has been having sightings of Bigfoot for the past 75 years, so at this point, if you're walking in the woods and you see a giant ape, it wouldn't really be a surprise. But there was one case that kickstarted the Bigfoot hype all those years ago, and that is the case of the Minerva monster. Sightings began in 1942 when locals reported an ape-like monster in Minerva, Ohio, and the concern for this monster only grew when a group of teenagers randomly disappeared in the forest near the area. The case of the monster was brought up to the public's attention when local resident Hal Caden told his story of encountering the Minerva monster. It began in August of 1978 when Caden and his friends were sitting on the back porch of their home. When they were all sitting and talking, they began to hear strange noises near the chicken coop. When they looked towards that direction, all they could find is two pairs of yellow eyes looking straight at them. When one of the friends decided to turn on their vehicle headlights, they described a creature 7 feet tall with quote-unquote black and brown matted hair that covered its entire head and face. At a number 7 spot, we have an abandoned subway. Cincinnati, Ohio actually has a subway station, and after years of construction, it never became operational, and now it just sits there under the city abandoned. Much of the reasons for its closure was due to the stock market crash in the 1920s and then the depression that hit in the 30s. The city didn't know what to do with the place, so they tried to give tours, but eventually conditions of the subway would become too dangerous for anyone to enter. Many urban explorers and paranormal investigators have found their way to the subway system, and many come back saying that this place is filled with various spirits. Some other reports include hearing footsteps in the dark and even moving shadows. Others have claimed to be chased out of these tunnels, but many think it's just homeless people. Regardless, you are not bound to have a good time if you decide to enter these abandoned tracks. At number 6 spot, we have the Ohio State Reformatory. Opening in 1890, this prison was used to house only the most dangerous criminals. This place is also known as the Mansfield Reformatory and was even labeled the most haunted location in the entire state of Ohio. Much happened at this prison back in the day, which could explain all the paranormal phenomena reported here. In the late 1930s, there was a riot in the East Cell Block which led to a number of deaths. As well, all the prisoners involved were sent to solitary confinement for a week without food or even water. And stuff like this would happen at the prison often, which would only bring more people to the brink of madness. As well, this prison housed many people passing away from influenza, tuberculosis, and one man even lit himself on fire inside of the prison.
Man, I can't hear!
So best believe this place is harsh. After closing in the 90s, many visitors and explorers have felt a noticeable chill when they walk on the grounds. The ghosts in here are apparently very touchy, and many report their clothes being tugged on. However, the most haunted location here is the Hole, which was a place where many went through solitary confinement with no food and water, and you can probably see why this is the most haunted place. In the hump of our list, we have the Walhalla Road. Located in Columbus, Ohio, is the infamous Walhalla Road. Not infamous for anything good, but for reasons that will make you avoid this road at all costs. One legend of the road goes that in the 1950s, there was once a man named Dr. Mooney who lived here alongside his wife and his children. They were living a pretty normal family life until the man decided to show more and more signs of insanity every single day. Then one day he just snapped and supposedly murdered his wife and all of his children and left them on the side of this road. Another story tells that Dr. Mooney hung himself on a tree beside this road after committing the murders. But regardless of what story you believe, what is true is that many people see his apparition in the form of a blue light on Walhalla Road. During the day, this road looks like any other road, but that all changes when nighttime hits. At number 4 spot, we have Melonhead Road. In Kirtland, Ohio, sometime in the 1970s, there were multiple reports of creatures with huge bald heads who would stalk this road and the woods of Northeast Ohio. Many people claim that these creatures are the product of failed government testing on humans, which they tried to hide from the public, but it seems like they didn't do a good job of hiding since they are still reported around the area. Others believe that melonheads are the products of a failed experiment from a man named Dr. Crow. It was said that Dr. Crow either made a deal with the local mental hospital or just kidnapped the patients altogether. He would do experiments on those with deformed and misshapen heads in hopes to minimize the size, but after doing multiple lobotomies, their heads would grow to extreme sizes, giving them the name melonheads. Number 3, the Twin City Opera House. In the middle of McConnellsville is the infamous theater known as the Twin City Opera House. It was built all the way in 1892 and serves the same purpose as it did in the beginning, which was used to be a theater and a government office. Much of the paranormal activity in this building is found in the basement, where there are multiple reports of black shadows that appear from the grounds and through the walls. Back in the 1920s, a man was murdered in the basement, which many believe that he is still in there. However, the most infamous ghost is the ghost of an usher who used to work there. He would occasionally walk up to people only to just say nothing and just stare at them. So you can imagine how awkward this encounter would be until you realized it was a ghost the whole time. At a number 2 spot, we have the Franklin Castle. Franklin Castle, designed designed by Haynes Tiedemann in 1881, was intended to be a dream residence for an immigrant family, but it gradually turned into a house of horrors. Over the years, this castle in Cleveland has had many countless deaths inside. So what occurred to make Franklin Castle so haunted? It all started when the owner's 15-year-old daughter passed away from diabetes. Then soon after, the owner's mom would pass away at the home as well. Then in the span of 2 years from 1886 to 1888, Haynes Tiedemann would bury 3 more of his children around the home. After all these tragedies struck, the house was eventually sold to the German Socialist Society in the 1920s, where many people claimed it was a site of alcohol production during the Prohibition and a meeting place for German spies during World War II. Then in the 1960s, a family of 6 moved into the home with hopes of turning into a restaurant. But the moment they moved in, they would be met with countless spirits and other entities that would just tell them to leave. Nowadays, many people believe this place is haunted by the spirit of its original owner. At a number 1 spot, we have Project Blue Book. So since Ohio is Ohio, best believe they have their own Area 51. Specifically known as Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, this place would be the spot where the United States Air Force conducted official studies of UFOs. This project would be known as Project Blue Book, and it began in July of 1947 after the infamous UFO crash in Roswell, New Mexico. Many people even believe that parts of that crash were taken to this airbase to be studied by government scientists. The project would end up shutting operations in 1969, but much of the place still remains a mystery. If you didn't believe me on any of these points, just listen to one of the majors talking about it.
Major Quintanilla, what are the objectives of Project Blue Book?
The objectives of the program are twofold. They're the same as they have been since 1953 when the regulations were different. First of all, to try to determine if the UFO phenomena presents a threat to the security of the United States. And second, to determine if the UFO phenomena exhibits any technological advances which could be turned into research and development.
At number 10 spot, we have the Tulsa's Hex House. Located on 10 East 21st Street in Oklahoma is the remnants of a home that was once a horror house. The owner of the home during the 1940s was a 45-year-old woman named Carolyn Smith. However, she wouldn't be the only resident in the home, as she would keep 2 other women there as quote-unquote slaves. These 2 women were named Virginia Evans and Willetta Horner, who were 30 and 31 years old at the time. They claimed that they were being hexed by Corlin and were basically forced to give their paychecks directly to her, with their big reward coming when they arrived in the gates of heaven. Basically, Corlin would keep these 2 women in her basement and live off their checks. But that wasn't all. She would also receive aid from one of her slaves' parents, in which she received a total of $20,000 for nursing care. After the 2 women were suspected of missing, a police investigation eventually found them in prison in the home's basement, living in the worst conditions, and this was during a 7-year span. Corlin will only get subjected to 1 year in prison, and the house was demolished with a parking lot built on top of it. However, some believe that the same basement is still underneath the parking lot. At a number 9 spot, we have the mysterious Shaman's Portal. There is thought to be a literal portal in the sand dunes of Beaver, Oklahoma, known as Shaman's Portal or Oklahoma's Bermuda Triangle to others. The legend goes that in the 1500s, there was once a Spanish explorer named Coronado who stumbled upon the sand dunes. When he entered, he was warned by all local native tribes about the dangers of exploring the dunes, especially since they would avoid this area for almost centuries. However, as like any other early settler, Coronado didn't listen and instead brought 3 other men with him to explore these dunes. Halfway through their trip, they encountered strange flashes which seemed to look like green lightning. Then 3 men accompanying him died immediately, and Coronado would write about this situation in his journal. Oklahoma State University archaeologist Dr. Mark Thatcher even spent 3 years studying the area until it was shut down by men with military credentials, which matched the description of the Men in Black. So could this place be a spot where potential UFOs could have been, or is this place in fact cursed like the natives say? At number 8 spot, we have the Satanic Purple Church. In the town of Spencer, Oklahoma, there are remains of an old church with stairs leading to a basement known as the Purple Church. Locals claim that this place was used for devil worship and forms of witchcraft and other animal sacrifices. Others even claim that when a full moon coincides with a Saturday, then Satanists will sacrifice virgins here at this church. Apart from that, before you enter, enter, you will be met with various satanic purple pentagrams and different symbols. If you happen to stumble upon the area, don't be surprised to see animal carcasses scattered around, as they were probably used in some type of ritual. The issue about this place is that people have been chased not only by the spirits, but by real men in robes and even the local landowners. So be sure to get permission if you decide to step foot in this haunted place. At a number 7 spot, we have the ghost of the Little Theater. Located in Tulsa, Oklahoma, is a tiny theater which was built in 1932. Although it is very small, it was home to many performances and progressed the entertainment scene in Oklahoma. However, in the 70s and the 80s, the theater would go through many fires which halted production, and some say there were deaths in those fires that were never recorded. Then by 2004, the theater would go through disrepair and many would trespass to leave graffiti and garbage around. Eventually, the theater was fixed back up, but many who would visit claim that it wasn't the same as it used to be. Locals believe that the spirits of former workers and crew still reside inside of the building. Stage performers often report that they are sharing a stage with someone when there is no one else backstage with them. And according to a legend, a director passed away during a performance. So could it be his apparition that appears on stage, or could it just be a piece of our imagination? At a number 6 spot, with the Spooklight Road. Spooklight Road, located in the small town Peoria, is a road in America where you are bound to encounter something you really don't want to. Specifically named East 50th Street, this stretch of road is said to have an unexplained light appearing over the sky in different shapes to different people. Some believe it's supernatural activity, while others believe UFOs. It was such a popular place during the 40s that during World War II, the US Army Corps of Engineers spent weeks in the area with the best technology, but in the end of the day, they had more questions than they had answers. This unexplained light has been debunked on different sources, with claims of a person holding a lantern or even a person on a horse holding a lantern. But from the photos, what do you guys think about this? In the hump of our list, we have the Camp Scott Girl Scout Massacre. In the year 1977, a horrific tragedy occurred at the Camp Scott in Mays County, Oklahoma. This is when 3 Girl Scouts aged 8 to 10 were murdered by one psychopath. However, this all could have been prevented if they had listened to a message they had received prior to the killings. This is because weeks before, they had received a message saying, quote, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls, intent 1. The camp director thought it was an elaborate joke and ended up discarding the letter. After a police investigation, they arrested local jail escapee Jean Leroy Hart, but 2 years later, he was released after there was insufficient evidence. Now when people try to walk through this now abandoned camp, they claim to hear the spirits of the 3 girls murdered. However, I personally think that this isn't the worst part. It's the fact that this case was never solved, especially considering in 1989, DNA testing was conducted that showed 3 of the 5 probes matched Hart's DNA. As well, in 2022, authorities made public that DNA evidence strongly suggests Hart's involvement. Regardless, may these girls rest in peace. At a number 4 spot, we have Veterans Lake. Introducing the most haunted lake in the state of Oklahoma, the Veterans Lake. Located in the western portion of Sulphur, Oklahoma, this lake was built to honor American war veterans. However, for many years, many have claimed that this lake is possessed by a woman who had drowned in the lake while trying to save her baby. People think that if you go swimming at night, her spirit will try to grab you and drown you down with her. There has also been stories of apparitions flying over the water, and with some claiming to see the woman's face when looking down at it. People have also reported hearing a woman's voice while boating on the lake crying for aid and requesting that someone save her child from drowning. At number 3 spot, with the Stone Lion Inn. In Guthrie, Oklahoma is the infamous Stone Lion Inn. The 114-year-old inn has a pretty dark history, with some of the guests never checking out of this hotel. And by that, I mean they're still inside. Since the beginning of its construction, every single owner and visitor have reported something strange coming from this home. And this shouldn't be a surprise, because in the 1920s, this place was used as a funeral parlor. So best believe more than a few spirits have made its way to this home. Now the current owner of the home has had the property since the 1980s, and they claim that ever since they began reconstruction of the home, the quote-unquote old souls have been woken up and they make their presence known inside of this building. Guests find themselves either being tucked in bed or dragged out of it when they're all alone. When paranormal investigators came in, they found that the bathrooms had high EMF ratings, which also happens to be the spot where many people took their own lives. So if you ever want to visit the most haunted building in Oklahoma, maybe the Stone Lion Inn is your best bet. At a number 2 spot, we have the Skirvin Hotel. First opening in 1911, this 10-story hotel was an instant hit to many tourists and anyone looking for a nice place to stay for a night. However, once people learned about the dark history attached to this place, many will go on searching for another local hotel. This is because the Skirvin Hotel has been rumored to be haunted by a lady who passed away the first year it opened up. The story goes that a maid named Effie had a secret affair with the owner, Mr. Skirvin, but he became extremely paranoid once once Effie delivered his baby, so he decided to hide Effie and lock her up in a room on the 10th floor. After days of being locked up, Effie decided to take their baby and jump off the balcony to their deaths. Ever since that tragedy, this hotel has had countless supernatural occurrences. Visitors claim to see the spirit of Effie roaming the halls at night. At a number 1 spot, we have elephant on LSD. In 1962, researchers from the University of Oklahoma injected a 7-ton bull elephant by the name of Tusco with 297 milligrams of LSD or acid. Lead researcher Jolly West was also involved in the controversial MK Ultra experiment, where they tested the use of psychedelics for brainwashing. The goal was trying to induce mus, which is the testosterone-fueled ultra rage that elephant males go into during breeding season. And 5 minutes after the elephant was injected, Tusco would fall to the ground and just start seizing. To make things worse, they injected Tusco with an additional 2,800 milligrams of promazine hydrochloride, an anti-nausea and sedative drug. After an hour of injections, Tusco would eventually pass away. The whole idea was controversial to begin with and shouldn't have ever happened. But what makes this failed experiment interesting is that acid is not supposed to be lethal to animals that size. To prove this, in 1984, a researcher from UCLA administered large doses of acid to 2 other elephants with none of them dying, making others believe that the other drugs they gave Tusco led him to his doom. At a number 10 spot, we have the Candy Cane Park. Located in La Grande, Oregon is the Candy Cane Park, otherwise known to locals as Hatchet Park, due to the accident that happened within the park grounds. Candy Cane Park was like any other park, apart from the fact that it followed the theme of candy canes all throughout the park. Kids loved to go here due to its appearance alone, but that all changed in 1983. This was when a young woman named Dana DeMars was strolling through the park at night when all of a sudden someone came out of the woods with a hatchet and started to chop off her limbs, including an attempt to behead her. She ended up passing away from her injuries inside of the park at the young age of 21. Now locals claim that her spirit calls the park home. She would be seen on the merry-go-round, and when the children would go on it, she would spin it uncontrollably. Her presence on the merry-go-round was so noticeable by many that the city had to remove it for good in 2003. At a number 9 spot, we have the Bandage Man of Cannon Beach. Back in the 1950s and 60s, the residents of Cannon Beach were terrorized by a figure known as the Bandage Man. This person would lurk in the forest and dark roads of Cannon Beach, completely covered from head to toe with bandages, and he had a very pungent smell of rotting flesh. Over the years, many drivers in the area have reported seeing this man covered in bandages who would jump in front of their car at random before disappearing upon impact. As well, he would go after young couples that are parked at different parking spots in Cannon Beach. Story of the Bandage Man has different iterations, but the most popular one says that he is the ghost of a logger who passed away after sustaining some of the worst injuries at a sawmill. His entire body was severely cut, but on his way to the hospital, their ambulance was hit by a landslide, causing the vehicle to fall off the edge of the cliff. And when policemen arrived at the accident scene, the Bandaged Man was nowhere to be seen. At a number 8 spot, we have the McMinnville UFO sighting. On May 11th, 1950, a farming couple named Paul and Evelyn Trent claimed to have spotted a shiny metallic object that was flying directly over their home. Immediately, they decided to grab a camera and snap 2 photos of the object before it flew away to the west. Paul's dad also was a witness to the flying object. After the photos were released, it got worldwide attention almost immediately, with one side arguing that the photos were a hoax and the other side claiming that this may actually be solid evidence of a 3-dimensional flying object. And just to back up their claims even more, the Trents were regarded as very honest people, and when their photos were publicized, they never even made an attempt to profit off the popularity, nor did they want to be in the limelight in the first place. And until their last breath, they would insist that the photos were genuine, but a lot of people have been able to debunk it. At a number 7 spot, we have the Lafayette curse. Unfortunate for those living in Lafayette, but your city has been supposedly cursed since the 1800s. Don't know if you guys knew about that one. The story goes that back in the 1850s, a woman in the town was accused of witchcraft, and just before her execution, she yelled out to the crowd of people saying, quote, "The town will burn down 3 times. And since saying that, the town has burned down twice, and people are awaiting the 3rd that has yet to come. At number 6 spot, we have the Oregon State Hospital. Built all the way back in 1883, the building served as a psychiatric hospital in the city of Salem. It was originally named the Oregon Hospital for the Insane, but changed for obvious reasons. And in the beginning, it was a place where lobotomies, eugenics, and electroconvulsive therapy was done. However, it was estimated that 2/3 of the people in the hospital were not only mentally insane, but also were found guilty of a crime. So best believe that fights were common and death was even more prevalent. In 1942, 47 people were killed and many others were sickened when poison used to kill bugs was accidentally used in place of flour in the kitchen. But the most notorious thing about this place is that they found the remains of 3,600 people in a room now known as the Room of the Forgotten Souls. They found cans upon cans of cremated ashes in the basement of this hospital. In the hump of our list, we have the agropelter. The agropelter is an aggressive creature said to lurk in the forests of Oregon, and they are most likely responsible for the deaths of many early lumberjacks in Oregon. These creatures resemble a slender ape-like animal with whip-like arms that extend for meters. They lurk atop trees and only attack if their territory is being threatened. So when Oregon was first being inhabited by early settlers, they began to start cutting down the trees for space, and then the agropelter would just hurl rocks and sharp sticks at them, causing many of them to pass away or even leave the land altogether. And when people tried to fight back, they would use their long arms and agility to escape pretty easily through the trees. And in more recent times, they haven't gone after humans, but instead has a diet consisting of owls and woodpeckers. And as those populations have been dying over the recent years, the agropelter will forever remain a mystery if they ever truly existed. At number 4 spot, we have the Shanghai Tunnels. Beneath Portland's very own Chinatown is a tunnel known as the Shanghai Tunnels. Now, they're completely closed off to the public, but back in the day, it consisted of small rooms that connected to one another, which made smuggling very easy at the time. As the tunnel was being used for more and more illegal activities, it eventually was a place where kidnappings and even murders were done. The term Shanghaiing or crimping came from these tunnels, which was basically when people would kidnap men and then sell them as slaves to ship captains that needed crewmates. These Shanghaiers would wait for people to leave local bars and taverns and then bait them directly into these tunnels and straight to the docks. There are tours to enter in some of the parts of the tunnels today, but visitors feel like they're being watched the entire time they're down there. Many of them report to see an Asian man walking past them in the tunnels as well, who is not a part of their group. And some even hear the voice calling out the name Sam coming from the tunnels. And if you do go, just be prepared to experience complete darkness. So just try not to hallucinate too much. At our number 3 spot, we have the Multnomah Falls. Located in Columbia River Gorge, Oregon, is the beautiful waterfall that brings an estimated 2.5 million visitors yearly. However, the more people that go there, the more that come out saying that this place is more haunted than people realize. So before this bridge was constructed, there was an old Native American legend that tells us of a maiden that leapt to her death from the upper falls in order to save her village from sickness. And no, the story doesn't specify why jumping off the cliff would save her village from sickness, but hey, maybe she had a sickness and didn't want to give anyone else it, so she just committed like that. Regardless, ever since the construction of the bridge, visitors claim to see her face appear to those standing on top of the bridge looking down at the water below. As well, every winter it's said that she appears at the upper falls as if she's ready to make the sacrifice for her village again. At number 2 spot, we have Polybius. Polybius is one of gaming's first urban legends and still terrifies people to this day regarding whether or not a game this dangerous could exist out there. In Portland 1981, games are on the rise. This was a time when gaming fever was a thing and many games would be thrown left and right in these arcades packed with children. The government saw this as an opportunity to test out one of their own experiments. This is when they made a game so addictive and so brainwashing that it would cause severe side effects in those who decide to play it. The only details that were definite was that it was named Polybius. The severe side effects of the game included mind control, seizures, brain aneurysms, and for some, it would cause them to take their own life. Despite all these warnings, Polybius looked like any regular arcade game, but due to its addictive capabilities, people were lining up for this game in the hundreds, unaware of the true effects it was having on their minds. Eventually, the game would disappear out of nowhere as if it never really existed, and the mystery of Polybius will just keep living on. At a number 1 spot, we have D.B. Cooper. D.B. Cooper is one of the most infamous criminals in aviation history. On November 24, 1971, a nondescript man calling himself Dan Cooper brought a one-way ticket on flight 305 from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. At 3 p.m., Cooper handed a flight receptionist a note stating that he had a bomb. Soon, Cooper gave the captain of the plane a note demanding 4 parachutes and $200,000 in $20 bills. When the flight landed in Seattle, the hijacker exchanged the flight's 36 passengers for the money and the parachutes. Cooper kept several crew members on board and the plane took off again, ordered to set a course for New Mexico. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, a little after 8 p.m., the hijacker did the incredible. He jumped out the back back of the plane with the parachute and some of the ransom money. And fortunately, the pilots landed safely, but Cooper just disappeared completely. 51 years later, and the FBI still don't know what happened to this man. And this will be the greatest mystery in aviation history. At number 10 spot, we have the walking statue of Augusta Bittner. In the northeastern part of Lancaster lies the Lancaster Cemetery. While the cemetery is massive and has hundreds of tombstones, one particular memorial sticks out to all guests who visit, and this is the tombstone of Augusta Bittner. The statue itself is gorgeous in an artistic standpoint, but I can definitely see why people fear the statue at night. And many visitors to the cemetery claim to see the statue walking across the grounds. The apparition is said to have flaming green eyes swollen with tears that seem to be trapped in a state of death, searching relentlessly for answers. Story goes that Augusta Bittner married a man named Stanley Tevis on May 3rd, 1905. They would eventually move to Philadelphia, where Augusta gave birth to their first daughter, Sylvia. Everything seemed to be going well until their first anniversary. Augusta fell ill to typhoid and passed a horrible death. So basically within 13 months, Augusta married, had a baby, and passed away. Her parents then spent a fortune on her tombstone, and over 100 years later, it's still standing strong and beautiful. Except for the fact it walks around crying. Yeah, no thanks. At a number 9 spot, we have the Clifton 5 Theater. This place was built in the mid 1850s and is still running to this day. The Clifton 5 Theater, formerly known as a Hunting Dawn Opera House, was so large that the street level had to be raised a total of 4 feet to accommodate it. And it was also a place where Freemasons would have meetings in secret. It wasn't until 1901 where the largest fire in Huntington's history burned down the theater. This fire saw the end of at least one person. Then in 1921, a man named Andy Gamble purchased the theater only to be met with yet another fire. Eventually, a man named Blackford bought the business and named it Clifton, which is named after his son who passed away in the military. And ever since, people have claimed to witness all sorts of creepy things. Visitors cite the lady in red ghost, who is believed to be a person who is well off, wearing a scarlet dress, walking up and down the stairways. When people get too close to her, they claim to hear her whisper, Lolita. Perhaps a daughter? No one really knows. At number 8 spot, we have the house on Ridge Avenue. In the north side of Pittsburgh lies in what is known as the house the devil built. The house is actually 1129 Ridge Avenue and known as the Conglier House. It was built in the 1860s by Charles Conglier, who lived in the house with his wife Lida and their maid Essie. The maid and Charles would be having a secret affair, and soon after, the wife overheard what was happening, so she collected a knife and proceeded to murder the two. She would be found later humming lullabies as she rocked on her chair. Then in 1900, Dr. Adolph purchased the home. One day, the neighbors heard a woman screaming in the house and called the police. Once the cops arrived, the doctor was nowhere to be found, but instead there was only a body of a woman with no head. Then a single mother and her 5 children lived there in the 1920s, until a nearby natural gas tank exploded and killed the mother, causing the 5 children to be left abandoned. Although the tale is said to be fabricated, many of these stories are actually true. At number 7, we have the Squonk. When I saw this guy, I couldn't help but laugh. And the only reason I added him on this list was because he was a mythical creature, and come on, he's terrifyingly cute and ugly at the same time. The Squonk is a pig hybrid that almost has decaying skin that is covered in warts. Its tusks are yellow and crooked with cauliflower ears, looking like any MMA fighter. It appears to be crying because it just thinks it's ugly, which is just so freaking sad. I kinda wanna just give it a hug. Except if you try, hunters claim that the creature turns into a puddle of tears. A man named J.P. Wentling was said to have captured the Squonk in a bag, but once he went to go show everyone, the thing that remained was only the liquid of the creature. Some believe the Squonks can predict the future and will accept something in exchange for this. However, since they are pessimistic creatures, only the bad parts of your future will be mentioned. So this is basically like having a fortune teller who just hates their life. At number 6 spot, with Albawitch. In the forest of Columbia, Pennsylvania is a 4-foot tall hairy creature known as the Albawitch. Their name is just short for apple snitch, since they are known to be snatching apples left and right like they're trying to miss a day at the doctor's. People who walk along the Susquehanna River claim to have these small creatures violently throw apples at them to push them away from their homes. Their homes are said to be on top of the treetops where they would only come down to gather apples. These hairy humanoids are often mistaken as Bigfoot, since they're also reported around the area. What if these guys are just Bigfoot children? This would explain their small stature at least. Despite the fact that these creatures are not likely to cause death, getting apples thrown at you aggressively doesn't sound too appealing either. In the hump of our list, we have the Appalachian Trail. From Maine all the way to Georgia, the Appalachian Trail is a 2,200-mile stretch that is also the longest hiking only trail in the world. This place is known for its beauty. Every mile is filled with fresh sights and breathtaking views. But when you have this much of inhabited land, some things are bound to happen to those visiting the area. Many hikers who have trekked this path have shared their haunting stories online for those to see, and it's crazy the amount of stories I read. So many it almost seems like it isn't a coincidence. Some have mentioned encountering the mountain people while on their hike, saying that they protect their camps with extreme violence and they have a tent-like city within these trails. Apart from the mountain men, the trail has had over 10 homicides. The first one happened in 1974 in Georgia and 3 in Pennsylvania. Then in 1990, a double murder took place at the top of Cove Mountain located within Pennsylvania. A young 25 and 26-year-old couple was shot and stabbed to death by a wanted criminal. The details of this crime are horrific, so I probably won't mention the specifics here. At a number 4 spot, we have No Face Charlie. If you grew up in the 1950s and 60s in western Pennsylvania, chances are you heard the legend of the Green Man or No Face Charlie. The legend says that No Face Charlie would stalk the remote streets at night and sometimes chase others away from him. No disrespect, but if I saw him at night, I would definitely be running the other way. No Face Charlie was actually based on a real man named Raymond Robinson. His story is pretty tragic. In 1919, Robinson was only 8 years old when he was reaching for a bird's nest at the top of an electrical pole when he was suddenly shocked with 11,000 volts of electricity. He was severely injured. His nose, lips, and ears, and also eyes were all gone or misshapen. And on top of that, one of his hands were completely blown off. This is what gave him this image that appears haunting for others. Raymond was in fact a really kind and friendly individual, but others feared him and would give him this negative stigma regardless of how he really was on the inside. He has now since passed, and I hope he's finally accepted for who he is. At number 3 spot, we have Blue Mist Road. Blue Mist Road is actually named Irwin Road, and locals claim that you can see a blue mist covering the entire road at night. Back in the 1800s, it was a dirt road, and even to this day, it still remains unpaved. The road has way too many tragic stories to tell you in one single point, but let me tell you a few of these. This place has a very dark history to it. Legends claim that a witch lived on this road who used to practice black magic, including rituals and human sacrifice. A family lived here, and one day the husband came home in a trance-like state and murdered his entire family. At number 2 spot, we have Anna Baker's dress. This dress belonged to Anna Baker, who was a part of a wealthy family located in Altoona, Pennsylvania. They would reside in what is known now as the Baker Mansion in 1849. The same year, Anna fell in love with a man and planned to get married, but her father Elias was like, no, that's not happening. It's believed he said no because he was part of a different social class. He didn't want this marriage to happen so bad he even got the man banished from the town. Anna was heartbroken and begged her dad, but her dad kept saying no. She then went out of her way to buy her own dress, the one in the photo, and showed her father, and he was still very adamant on the decision to say no. So in spite of her father, she was never married even after his death. Fast forward to 1922, all the members of the Baker family passed away, and the mansion had been bought up by the Blair County Historical Society and turned into a museum. In the museum, guests report seeing the glass of the dress being shaken violently. Others report seeing a woman apparition in a black dress staring into this display. Perhaps it's Anna from the grave, but we'll never know. At number 1 spot, we have the Devil's Road. Yup, nothing good about this one. Night Shyamalan filmed his 2004 horror film The Village in a nearby field because this creepy area just north of the Delaware border is so infused with ghostly tales. Rumor has it that a white house hidden in the wood on Devil's Road, officially named Cosart Road, was home to the family of the DuPonts, a wealthy family who resorted to inbreeding to keep their fortune within the family. The cult house, as it was known, was used to perform incestuous marriages and to conceal deformed offspring. The trees in the area have a dramatic bend away from the house, as if they're attempting to flee away from it.